The day my daughter-in-law told me I was too poor to help with my own grandson's future was the day I decided to spend $50,000 on myself instead. And let me tell you, the look on her face 3 years later when she came begging for money was worth every single penny. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how a single comment about a Goodwill sweater turned into the most satisfying revenge of my life. I was folding a sweater I just bought from Goodwill, a beautiful cashmere blend that had cost me exactly $4.50, when my phone rang. It was my son, David. "Hey, Mom, Stefana and I are coming over for dinner tonight. That okay?" Of course it was okay. I loved having my son over, even if it meant dealing with my daughter-in-law's comments about my dated kitchen or my vintage furniture. I'd been a widow for 5 years, living alone in the house my late husband Robert and I had bought 30 years ago, and I liked my life just fine. But Stefana had opinions about everything, and none of them were kind. I should mention that I wasn't broke, not even close. Robert had left me with a paid-off house, a solid life insurance policy, and about $120,000 in savings. I'd worked as a librarian for 35 years, and we'd lived carefully, saved diligently, never spent beyond our means. I could have bought new furniture, a new car, designer clothes if I wanted them, but I didn't want them. I liked thrift stores. I liked finding treasures. I liked not wasting money on things that didn't matter. Stefana didn't see it that way. I put the sweater in my closet and started preparing dinner. Nothing fancy, just pot roast with potatoes and carrots. The kind of meal I'd made 1,000 times, the kind David used to beg for when he was a kid. I made homemade rolls from scratch, the way Robert used to love them. I set the table with the dishes Stefana once called charmingly outdated, which I'm pretty sure was not a compliment. They arrived at 6 sharp. David gave me a warm hug, his face tired from work but genuinely happy to see me. Stefana, on the other hand, barely looked at me as she walked in, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floors like tiny hammers of judgment. "Hi, Mugrut," she said, and I watched her eyes scan my living room with barely concealed disgust. "Still have that old couch, I see. David, didn't we talk about helping your mom upgrade her furniture?" "The couch is comfortable," I said simply, heading to the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. David, honey, can you grab the rolls from the oven?" We sat down to eat, and for the first few minutes everything was fine. David talked about a difficult client at work, some complicated tax situation he was trying to navigate. I asked about the baby. Stefana was 7 months pregnant now, and despite everything, I was genuinely excited to meet my grandchild. This would be my first, and probably my only, grandchild. I'd already started a college fund, putting aside $500 every month. It wasn't a fortune, but over 18 years with compound interest, it would add up to something meaningful. Maybe $50,000 or $60,000, enough to make a real difference. "So," I said, cutting into my pot roast, "I wanted to talk to you both about something. I've been thinking about the baby's future, and I've started a college fund. It's not a lot right now, but by the time she's 18. Stefana interrupted, setting down her fork with a sharp clink. "We're having a boy, Mugrut. I told you that 2 weeks ago." "Oh," I said, feeling my face flush. "I'm sorry, I must have forgotten, with everything going on." "We're having a boy," she repeated, her voice sharp with irritation. "We found out definitively last week. The doctor confirmed it, a son." "That's wonderful," I said quickly, looking at David. He was studying his plate intently, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. "Well, either way, boy or girl, I've started setting aside money each month. I know college is expensive these days, and I want to help. I figure by the time he's 18, if I keep putting aside $500 a month." Stefana let out a laugh, not a polite, uncomfortable laugh, a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the room like a knife. "Mugrut," she said, setting down her fork deliberately and folding her hands on the table like she was about to deliver bad news to a child. "Where exactly are you getting this money? From your, what do you call it? Your thrift store budget?" I felt my face grow hot. "I shop at thrift stores sometimes, yes. There's nothing wrong with." "There's nothing wrong with it if you're poor," Stefana said, her voice dripping with condescension. every word carefully measured to wound. "But we're not poor, Mugret. We don't need money from someone who shops at Goodwill and drives a car from 2008. We have standards for our son. We want him to have the best of everything, not hand-me-downs from someone who clearly doesn't understand what quality means." The room went completely silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at David, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his wife that she was being cruel and out of line. But he just sat there, staring at his plate, his jaw clenched tight, saying absolutely nothing. "Stefana," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, "I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to be a good grandmother." "We don't need help from someone like you," she said, standing up abruptly and smoothing down her designer maternity dress, the kind that probably cost more than my entire month's grocery budget. "David and I are perfectly capable of providing for our son. We both have good jobs. We have savings. We don't need charity from someone who clearly doesn't understand how to live properly." She grabbed her expensive leather purse, the one with the designer logo prominently displayed. "David, let's go. I'm not hungry anymore. This whole conversation has made me lose my appetite." David finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or guilt, but not enough shame or guilt to actually do anything about it. He stood up slowly, mumbled a quick "sorry, Mom," that barely qualified as words, and followed his wife out the door like a puppy following its master. I sat there at my dining room table, staring at the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon making, at the homemade rolls going cold in their basket, at the three-place settings I'd arranged so carefully, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Not even hurt, though that was definitely part of it. More like absolute clarity. Stefana thought I was poor. She thought I was pathetic. She thought I was someone to be puttied or mocked. Well, I was about to show her exactly how wrong she was. The next morning, I woke up early, got dressed in my embarrassing thrift store clothes, got into my pathetic 2008 Honda Civic, and drove straight to my bank. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," I told the teller, a sweet young woman named Indra who'd helped me many times before. "Of course, Mrs. Petson. How much?" $50,000, I said calmly. Indra's eyes widened. 50? That's quite a large withdrawal. May I ask what it's for? We just need to make sure." "It's for me," I said simply. "I'm going on a trip." 20 minutes later, I walked out of that bank with a cashier's check for $50,000, and I felt lighter than I had in years. That money had been weighing on me, you see. I'd been saving it for David and Stefana, thinking about their future, their needs, their dreams, but they'd made it very clear they didn't want it. They didn't need help from someone like me. So I was going to spend it on someone who did appreciate it. Me. I drove straight to a travel agency, one of those boutique places that specializes in luxury trips. The kind of place I'd walked past 100 times but never thought I'd actually enter. "I want to go to Italy," I told the travel agent, a polished woman in her 40s named Caroline. 3 weeks. I want to see Rome, Florence, Venice, the Amalfi Coast. I want to stay in beautiful hotels, eat at wonderful restaurants, take cooking classes, wine tour, everything. I want the full experience." Caroline's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing. What's your budget?" $50,000, I said. "I want first-class flights, the best hotels, private tour if possible. I want this to be the trip of a lifetime." And that's exactly what we planned. First-class flights on a major airline, where I'd have a bed that actually laid flat. A 5-star hotel in Rome with a view of the Colosseum. Another stunning hotel in Florence overlooking the Duomo. A luxury boutique hotel in Venice on the Grand Canal. Wine tastings in Tuscany. A private cooking class with an Italian grandmother in her home kitchen. A boat tour along the Amalfi Coast. Every single thing I'd ever dreamed of doing but thought I never would. The trip was booked for 2 months away, which gave me plenty of time to prepare. I got a passport, something I'd never had before. I bought a few new outfits, nice ones, from actual stores instead of thrift shops because why not? I was going to Italy. I was going to live. In the meantime, I didn't tell David. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept living my life exactly as I always had. I went to the library where I'd worked for so many years and checked out travel books about Italy. I volunteered at the animal shelter every Tuesday. I went to my book club. I shopped at Goodwill because, honestly, I still enjoyed it. Finding a beautiful cashmere sweater for $4 brought me genuine joy, and I wasn't going to stop just because Stephanie thought it was beneath me. David called a few times over those 2 months. He always apologized for Stephanie's behavior, but in that vague, non-committal way that didn't actually mean anything. "She's pregnant, Mom. Her hormones are all over the place. She didn't mean what she said." But she did mean it. I knew she did. And more importantly, David knew she did too. He just didn't want to deal with it. The last time he called before my trip, he invited me to a baby shower Stephanie was throwing. "It's at that fancy hotel downtown," he said. "Stephanie really went all out. Her parents are paying for most of it, but we'd love it if you could come." "What should I bring?" I asked. "Oh, you don't need to bring anything," he said quickly. "Just yourself." Translation: they didn't want a gift from me because anything I could afford wouldn't be nice enough. "I'll be there," I said, even though I already knew I wouldn't be. 2 months later, I was standing in the Rome airport, my designer luggage rolling behind me, wearing a beautiful outfit I'd bought specifically for this trip, and I felt like I was floating. The first-class flight had been everything I'd dreamed of: an actual bed, real silverware, a menu with choices, a flight attendant who treated me like I mattered. When we landed, there was a private car waiting to take me to my hotel, a stunning 5-star property with marble floors and crystal chandeliers and a view of the Colosseum from my room. My room, not a room, my room, with a balcony where I could sit with a glass of wine and watch the sun set over ancient Rome. I unplugged my phone, ordered room service, and slept like the dead. The next 3 weeks were the most incredible of my life. I walked through the Colosseum and imagined gladiators. I stood in the Sistine Chapel and craned my neck up at Michelangelo's ceiling until my neck ached. I ate pasta in tiny restaurants where no one spoke English, and the wine was poured generously, and nobody cared if I was wearing designer clothes or thrift store finds. I took a cooking class with a 70-year-old Italian woman named Rosa who taught me to make proper carbonara and kissed both my cheeks when I got it right. I stood on a boat off the Amalfi coast and watched the sun sink into the Mediterranean and thought, this is it. This is what life is supposed to feel like. I was in Venice, sitting at a cafe on the Grand Canal with a glass of Prosecco and a plate of fresh seafood when I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from David, 12 from Stephanie, dozens of increasingly frantic text messages. The baby was coming early. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I finished my Prosecco, paid my bill, and walked slowly back to my hotel. Then I called David. "Mom," he answered on the first ring, his voice frantic. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm in Italy," I said calmly, looking out at the gondolas gliding past my window. There was a long, stunned silence. What? Italy? What are you doing in Italy?" "I'm on vacation," I said. "It's beautiful here. You and Stephanie should visit sometime." "Mom, Stephanie's water broke. We're at the hospital. The baby's coming 5 weeks early. Everything's okay, but we need help. Stephanie's parents are on a cruise somewhere in the Mediterranean. We can't reach them, and we don't have anyone else. Please, can you come home?" I took a sip of water and looked out at Venice. "David, I'm in Europe. I can't just drop everything and fly home. You'll be fine. You're about to be a father. You can handle this." "But Mom..." "Besides," I said, my voice still calm, still kind, "I'm having dinner tonight at this wonderful restaurant that's been recommended to me. They make fresh pasta by hand every morning. I've been looking forward to it all week." "Mom, this is important." "So is this," I said gently. "David, you're a grown man. You're about to have a baby. You need to figure this out. You don't need me there holding your hand." "But..." "I'll be home in a week," I said. "Send me pictures. I can't wait to meet him." I hung up before he could say anything else. When I got home a week later, tanned and relaxed and feeling better than I had in decades. My phone had 32 missed calls, and I'd never felt less guilty about anything in my life. I went to the hospital the next evening to meet my grandson. They'd named him Jake, which I thought was a nice, simple name. When the nurse handed him to me, wrapped in his little hospital blanket, I felt my heart absolutely melt. He was perfect. Beautiful. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a little button nose that wrinkled when he yawned. "Mom," David said, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it for days. "Where were you? We really needed you." "I was in Italy," I said, not taking my eyes off Jake. "I sent you pictures, did you not see them?" "We needed help," he said again, his voice cracking slightly. "And you figured it out," I said, adjusting Jake's blanket. "Look at you, you're a father now, you did it all by yourself." Stephanie was in the hospital bed, looking exhausted and annoyed, her hair unwashed, her designer hospital gown somehow still managing to look expensive. "Margaret," she said, her voice sharp despite her obvious exhaustion, "we need to talk about the college fund. Have you been keeping up with the deposits? We need to make sure everything's on track." I looked at her, this woman who'd insulted me in my own home, who'd mocked my kindness, who'd told me I wasn't good enough to help with my own grandson's future. "What college fund?" I said, my voice pleasant, almost cheerful. The color drained from her face. "The one you started. You said you were putting aside $500 a month for Jake's education." "Oh, that," I said, looking back down at Jake's precious sleeping face. "I decided to spend that money on myself instead. I went to Italy. It was absolutely wonderful. I stayed in a hotel that had a view of the Colosseum. Can you believe that? I saw the actual Colosseum from my bed. I took a cooking class in Tuscany and learned to make fresh pasta. I went on a wine tour and tasted vintages from the 1970s. I sailed along the Amalfi Coast and watched the sunset over the Mediterranean. It was, without question, the best 3 weeks of my entire life." Stephanie sat up straighter in her hospital bed, her face going from pale to bright red. What? You spent the college fund on a vacation." "It wasn't a college fund," I said calmly, still holding Jake. "It was my money, and you made it very clear you didn't want it. You said you didn't need charity from someone like me, someone who shops at thrift stores, someone who doesn't understand quality." "That's not, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said, my voice still calm, still pleasant, but with steel underneath. "You meant every single word. You meant it when you mocked my clothes, my car, my furniture, my life. You meant it when you told me to keep my money because you have standards, so I kept it. And I spent it on someone who actually appreciates it, me." "But this is for Jake," Stephanie said, her voice rising, causing Jake to squirm in my arms. "This is for your grandson's future. How can you be so selfish?" "I can be selfish," I said, "because you told me to be. You told me my money wasn't good enough for your standards, so I found a different use for it. And let me tell you, Stephanie, that pasta I ate in Florence, that view from my hotel in Venice, that wine I drank overlooking the Tuscan hills, that was worth every penny, every single penny." David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mom, come on." She was just upset. The pregnancy was hard. She was emotional, she didn't mean. "David," I interrupted, looking at him directly for the first time. "Stop, just stop. Your wife told me in my own home, after I spent hours cooking a meal for you both, that my money wasn't good enough, that I wasn't good enough. And you sat there and said nothing, not one word in my defense, not one word standing up for your own mother. So yes, I spent that money on myself, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." I handed Jake back to Stephanie, who took him with shaking hands. "He's beautiful. Congratulations to both of you. I'm sure you'll figure everything out on your own. You don't need help from someone like me, remember." I walked out of that hospital room with my head held high, got into my embarrassing 2008 Honda Civic, and drove home to my dated house with my vintage furniture, and I felt absolutely no guilt whatsoever. 3 years passed. 3 years of relative silence from David and Stephanie. They'd send the occasional text with photos of Jake, birthday pictures, first steps, first words, but they never invited me over, never asked me to babysit, never included me in anything. That was fine. I was busy anyway. I discovered something in Italy. I liked traveling. I liked seeing new places. I liked being somewhere that nobody knew me or had opinions about my thrift store clothes. So I went back, not to Italy this time, but to Greece, then to Spain, then to Portugal. I joined a travel group for women over 60 and I made friends, real friends. Women who didn't care what kind of car I drove or where I bought my sweaters. Women who wanted to talk about books and art and food and life. I took art classes. I learned to paint watercolors and I wasn't very good, but I enjoyed it. I joined a book club at the local library. I volunteered more at the animal shelter. I lived my life and it was good. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Stephanie. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Margaret," she said, and I could hear something in her voice I'd never heard before. Desperation. "We need to talk." "Okay," I said, setting down my book. "It's about Jake. He's going to start preschool next year, and we've been looking at schools. The good ones, the ones that will actually prepare him for kindergarten and set him up for success in life, they're expensive. Really expensive." "I see," I said, my voice neutral. "And we've been struggling a bit financially," she continued, the words coming out in a rush. "David's company downsized 6 months ago. He took a 20% pay cut. My hours got reduced. We're managing okay, we're making the mortgage payments, but we can't afford the preschool we want for Jake. Not without help. The tuition is $15,000 a year and we can't do it on our own." "That's tough," I said sympathetically, and I meant it. I didn't hate Stephanie. I just didn't particularly like her either. "So we were hopping," she said, her voice getting smaller. "We were wondering if you could help us with the tuition. It's $15,000 for the year, and if you could just cover half of that or even a quarter, it would make such a difference. Jake deserves the best start in life, and this school is really—" "Stephanie," I said gently, cutting her off, "I'm afraid I can't help you." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "What? Why not?" "Because 3 years ago, you made it very clear that you didn't need help from someone like me. Someone who shops at thrift stores. Someone who doesn't understand quality. Remember." "Margaret, I was pregnant, I was hormonal, I was stressed. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said, using the exact same words I'd said in the hospital. "You meant every word, and that's okay. You don't need my charity. You have standards, remember." "But this is for Jake," she said, her voice rising, becoming shrill. "Your grandson, don't you care about his education? Don't you want him to have opportunities?" "Of course I care," I said calmly. "But you can't spend years treating me like I'm beneath you and then come asking for money when you need it. That's not how this works, Stephanie." "So you're just going to let your grandson go to some subpar public school because of your pride?" "No," I said, my voice still calm. "I'm going to let you and David figure out what you can afford, just like millions of other parents do every single day. Jake will be fine. Public preschool isn't prison, Stephanie. It's not even subpar. Some of the best educated people I know went to public school their entire lives." "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You're selfish and petty and vindictive." "And I shop at thrift stores," I added pleasantly. "Don't forget that part. That seems to be very important to you." "I can't believe you do this to your own grandson." "I'm not doing anything to Jake," I said, my voice finally getting an edge. "You did this, Stephanie. You created this situation. You're the one who decided my money wasn't good enough 3 years ago. You don't get to reject someone's help and then demand it later when it's convenient for you." "We needed you and you were in Italy," she shouted. "Yes," I said. "I was in Italy, spending the money you told me to keep, having the time of my life, and I'd do it again." I hung up. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Actual mail, handwritten on nice stationery. It was from David. "Mom, I don't even know how to start this letter. I've tried writing it a dozen times, and every time I just stare at the paper and feel like an absolute failure. You were right about everything. Stephanie and I have been in marriage counseling for the past 6 months. It's been really hard, but it's also been necessary. Our counselor has helped us see some patterns in our relationship that aren't healthy. One of the biggest ones is how we treat the people around us, especially you. I let Stephanie talk to you like that. At dinner that night 3 years ago, and so many times before that, I heard her make those comments about your clothes, your car, your house. And I said nothing. I told myself I was keeping the peace, avoiding conflict, letting you two work it out between yourselves. But really, I was just being a coward. You're my mother. You raised me by yourself after Dad died. You worked every single day to give me a good life. You taught me to be kind, to work hard, to save money, to appreciate what I have. And I repaid you by sitting there silently while my wife insulted you in your own home. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for not standing up for you. I'm sorry for letting Stephanie make you feel small. I'm sorry for calling you from Italy and expecting you to drop everything to come help us when we'd spent the previous 2 years making it clear we didn't need you. You deserved that trip to Italy. You deserve to spend that money on yourself. You deserve so much more than the way we've treated you. I don't expect you to help us with Jake's preschool. I don't expect you to forgive us right away. I don't expect anything. But I do want you to know that I love you and I'm sorry, and I want Jake to know his grandmother. Not because we need money, not because it's convenient, but because you're an amazing person and he deserves to have you in his life. Stephanie is writing you a letter too. I don't know what it says and I didn't ask, but I hope you'll at least read it. If you're willing, maybe we could start over. No expectations, no judgments, just family. Love. David. I read that letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table in my dated house, wearing a sweater I'd bought at Goodwill for $4.50, and I felt something in my chest loosen. Then I opened the second letter. Stephanie's handwriting was messier, like she'd been crying while writing it. Margaret, I don't know if you'll even read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I've been in therapy, individual therapy, not just marriage counseling. My therapist has helped me understand that a lot of my behavior comes from my own insecurities. My parents always had money, but they also had expectations. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to look right. Success meant designer clothes and expensive cars and the right zip code. I internalized all of that. I made my entire identity about having nice things and looking successful. And when I met David, whose mom shops at thrift stores and drives an old car, I felt superior. I felt like I was better than you, and I treated you accordingly. I was wrong. I was so wrong. You are one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met. You raised an incredible man who I'm lucky to be married to. You offered to help us financially, repeatedly, and I threw it back in your face because I was too proud and too stupid to see it for what it was. Love. I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know that, but I want you to know that I'm trying to change. I'm trying to be a better person, a better wife, a better mother, and I want Jake to know you, really know you. Not because we need anything from you, but because you're his grandmother and you deserve to be part of his life. I'm sorry for every cruel comment I made. I'm sorry for making you feel unwelcome. I'm sorry for being so blinded by materialism that I couldn't see what actually matters. If you're willing to give us another chance, I promise to do better. I promise to treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve. With sincere apologies. Stephanie. I sat there with both letters spread out on my table, and I thought about Robert, about what he would say if he were here. He'd probably laugh and say, "Well, it took them long enough." Then he'd tell me that holding grudges never made anyone happy. That family is family, even when they mess up. So I picked up the phone and called David. That was a year ago. David and Stephanie and Jake come over for dinner every other week now. We rotate houses sometimes, but mostly they come here because, as Jake says, Nana's house is cozy. Stephanie apologized again in person. Really apologized, looking me in the eye, taking full responsibility. She doesn't make comments about my clothes anymore. In fact, she actually asked if she could come thrift shopping with me, and we found her a vintage Chanel jacket for $22 that she wore to a work event and got a dozen compliments on. I did end up helping with Jake's preschool, but not the way they expected. I didn't pay for the $15,000 a year private preschool. Instead, I helped them research public programs, and we found an excellent one that cost nothing. Then I offered to pay for enrichment activities. Piano lessons, which Jake loves, swimming lessons, which he tolerates, a kid's art class on Saturdays, which he's genuinely talented at. I spend the money on things Jake actually wants to do, not on status or appearances. And you know what? Jake is thriving. He's happy. He's creative. He's kind. He doesn't care that he's not at some fancy private preschool. He just cares that on Tuesdays he gets to come to Nana's house and make cookies. Last week, we were in my kitchen making chocolate chip cookies, and Jake noticed my sweater. "Nana, I like your sweater," he said, his little hands covered in cookie dough. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "I got it at a thrift store." "What's a thrift store?" he asked, his big brown eyes curious. Stephanie was leaning against the counter, and I saw her tense up, waiting to see what I'd say, probably worried I'd bring up everything that had happened. But I just smiled at Jake. "It's a place where you can find really good things for not very much money," I said. "Things that other people don't want anymore, but that are still perfectly good, like treasure hunting." "That sounds cool," Jake said. "Can we go sometime?" "Absolutely," I said. "We can look for treasures together." Stephanie relaxed and then she smiled, a real smile. "That sounds really nice," she said quietly. "Can I come too?" "Of course," I said. We went the next Saturday, the three of us. Jake found a stuffed dinosaur that became his new favorite toy. Stephanie found a beautiful vintage scarf. I found a set of watercolor paints for my art class. When we got home, Jake hugged me tight and said, "That was the best day, Nana." And you know what? It really was. So what's the moral of this story? I think it's pretty simple. Don't judge people by where they shop, what they drive, or how they choose to spend their money, because you never know when you might need those same people. And more importantly, kindness costs nothing, but so does karma. The people who matter, the people who truly love you, won't care about your price tags. They'll care about your heart. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living your best life, refusing to let other people's judgments define you, and being there when they finally figure out what actually matters. I still shop at thrift stores. I still drive my 2008 Honda Civic. I still live in my dated house with my vintage furniture. But I also go to Italy when I want to. I take art classes. I spend time with my grandson. I live on my terms, not anyone else's. And that Goodwill sweater I was folding when this whole thing started, I still have it. I wore it to Thanksgiving dinner last year, and Stephanie complimented it. Sometimes the best victories are quiet. Sometimes they're wearing a $4 sweater and feeling like $1,000,000. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. I hope it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by what you own, where you shop, or what anyone else thinks of you. Your worth is determined by how you treat people, how you live your values, and whether you have the courage to stand up for yourself when it matters. Leave me a comment and let me know what you thought. Have you ever had someone judge you for something like this? How did you handle it? I'll see you in the next story. Take care of yourselves and remember, kindness matters, but so does self-respect.